Okay, friends, we're going to continue on with the toolbar. So I know that I've thrown a lot of information at you this week. We've kind of started very broad where we go through all of the tools and just give a brief description of what they all do. But now I kind of want to dive down and really start picking out tools that we're really going to be using a lot, right? Because it's not like we're going to be using all of these tools all of the time, right? Because remember, Photoshop has been around for a long time. Tons have been added to Photoshop. You know, all the things that you can do with Photoshop, whether it's 3D graphics rendering, whether it's painting, digital illustration, all that stuff has been added after the fact. And so tools have been added. And so it's not like we're going to always use every single tool. So there's ones that we're really going to focus on, and I'm going to cover that in this little lecture here. So first, I just kind of want to talk and refresh your minds about how the toolbar works. Remember, you can organize it in one row, or click this little arrow into two rows. It's personal preference, however you want to do it. I'm going to keep mine in one row. And I just kind of want to break down the organization of the toolbar. And once again, this is a review. So these first, these first four tools all the way, first four tools all the way down to the magic wand right here that I have my cursor on. These are all what we call the move and selection tools, right? Move and selection. They're by default at the top because they get used a lot, okay? So that's that. Then we have the crop tool right here, which is going to be your crop and slice tool. Because remember, every time you see this little tiny white arrow in the bottom left-hand corner, you can control click, and there's going to be more tools underneath it. So under the crop tool, we have the crop tool, perspective crop, slice tool, slice select tool. So to be honest with you, when we're dealing with photographic imagery, really we're going to be using the crop tool 99% of the time. There might be a rare occasion when we use the perspective crop tool. We're also going to talk about other ways to fix perspective in a photograph. So most of the time, we're just using the crop tool. The other thing that I want to kind of touch on is, if you see up here, I'm actually using Photoshop CC 2017. I'm like a Luddite using a really old version of Photoshop. I imagine all of you are using 2021 or 2020. And the thing that I want to talk about that is there are what's called a rich tool demonstrations in, I believe it's in CC 2019 and newer. If you float your cursor over any of these tools, it should pop up a little demo video of how the tool is used. So that's just something that, you know, has been added since 2019 in Photoshop. And I think it's actually, you know, to learn Photoshop, I think that's a really useful thing. But since I'm using 2017, it doesn't pop up. And a lot of people that have gotten really comfortable with the tools end up turning those videos off. But you'll see if I float over my tools on my toolbar, you'll see what pops up is the name of the tool, right? So if I float over the brush tool, it will say the brush tool B. What B is telling me is that's the keyboard shortcut. So that's a good way to just kind of like start to familiarize yourself with the keyboard shortcuts, right? So the move tool is the keyboard shortcut of V, right? So if I had the magic wand selected and I want to pick the move tool really quick, I can just hit V on my keyboard and it selects the move tool. So that's really handy. Okay, so we have our measurement tool with this eyedropper right here, which is right under our crop tool. Once again, we can control click and we see that there are more tools underneath the eyedropper. Just like the crop tool though, most of the time, I'd say 99.9% of the time, we're going to just be using the eyedropper tool. Alright, below that, we have the spot healing brush all the way down to the dodge tool. These are what we call retouching and painting tools, okay? So that's all of these in this stretch right here. And all of this is referenced in the Photoshop Tools and Toolbar Overview handout that you read earlier this week. Alright, below it we have the pen and the type tool. These are just drawing and type tools right here. And then we have, underneath it we have what we call our navigation tools. Okay, so these are our navigation tools. Below that, this is the 3-bar menu is how we edit our toolbar. So if you wanted to customize your toolbar and get rid of stuff or add stuff in or put it in a different order, you can do that. I've never found the need to do that. I have no problem with just, you know, I always felt like if Photoshop got if they kept adding more tools and didn't do this like stacked tool thing and there ended up being 3 times as many tools as this, maybe I'd go through and edit them and get rid of some. But as of now, it's pretty easy to just kind of have all of these in one row. So I'm just gonna leave that. All right. Below that, we have the set foreground color. This is something that we're going to use when we get into layer masks. So just keep note of this. And here we have an edit quick mask. Don't worry, next week or the week after, we're going to get into masks and talk about the functions of those. And below that, we have, sorry, it's funny, this button in Photoshop is right over the screen record button that I have here. This is how you just, I'm kind of scared to push it because it might pause the video again, but let's give it a go. So it changes the window view of Photoshop. Oh, and you can see the keyboard shortcut is F, so I'm just going to hit that. I'm just going to hit F. So we could go full screen. We could go our regular view. We could go our regular view without, what is that missing? The second one. Oh, without the measurements. So you can just scroll through different window views, and that's all the way down here at the bottom. So just so you know, so I would recommend if you are using a newer version of Photoshop than I am, CC 2019 or newer, by default the rich tooltips should be on. So anytime you float your cursor over any of these tools, there will be a little brief demonstration on how to use that. I think that's really useful. If you ever want to turn that function off, you can just go to Edit, and I think down below the toolbar in 2019 or newer, there will be a tool options button that you can click and turn off the rich tooltips. So I hope that is useful for you. Right now, let's just focus on a couple tools. So the move tool is something that we're going to use all the time, right? It's a pretty important tool. It's just, we're going to be clicking and dragging stuff around all the time. Now, I don't have really anything there, but if I was to have, another, let me just grab something here. Let's grab this. Copy, go back here, paste. Oh, hold on. Oh, geez. Copy. Let's try this one more time here. I don't know why it's not letting me paste anything in here. Let's just grab this picture. Select all, copy. Having a problem with Photoshop here. What is going on here? Give me one sec, sorry. Oh, here we go. So if I just pasted this image in here and then I grab my move tool, we can see that I can move and drag it around using the move tool. Like I said, if I have another tool selected and I just want to move this really quick, I could hit the V button and click and drag anywhere. Also notice, this is a review for you, but every time you select a tool, up here your tool options bar changes, right? Because it's going to be the options for that specific tool. So that's something that we covered in Module 2, I believe, or Module 1. So every tool has a different little menu up there. So there's that. I'm just going to turn this layer off because I don't need it. So that's the move tool, really useful. It's kind of also the tool that I use as like the default tool, right? So whenever I'm not, whenever I just kind of get started, it's always the tool that's selected. The reason I say that is sometimes students get really stuck because they'll accidentally have the crop tool on and not notice that there's these binding boxes around the frame, right? We see around the frame on the canvas, we have these the marching ants around the sides with these handles, and it's easy to sometimes not see those. And then you go and do something like, let's go layer, new adjustment layer, and I don't. Oh geez, this is a horrible demo. I'm sorry. Let's see here, layer, adjustment layer, curves. I didn't think that it would let us do it, but it will let us do it. Sorry, I'm lying to you. I think it used to be that with the crop tool on, you couldn't kind of do anything, and so students would often get stuck, like, I don't know what's going on, Photoshop won't let me do anything, and the reason is because the crop tool is on, especially in like a window like this, so I just hit return on the keyboard so that it's previewing the crop, and now if I go, the menus are all going to be grayed out, and I think students sometimes, especially if this grid happens to get turned off in the crop, students will be like, why isn't everything grayed out? And the reason is the crop tool's on. So just be careful of that. And like I said, by default, just kind of keep the move tool selected. It's kind of the easiest one. So the next tool I want to talk about is the rectangle marquee tool. Once again, I won't go too in depth with how this is used because we already talked about it, but it's a way of making rectangular selections. Photoshop is a software that is really specialized in making selections in an image, and so it is something that we're going to be diving really deep into. I believe it's in the next module we're going to be talking a lot about making selections. So if I hit Control and click into the rectangle marquee tool, we have the elliptical marquee tool. So you see if I can draw a circle. If I hold down Shift when I do that, it will always be a perfect circle, right? So if I don't hold down Shift, we can get like, kind of more eggy, right? But if I want a perfect circle, I gotta hold down Shift and it'll make a perfect circle for me. And then I can click and drag that selection around. So that is that. The next is the single row marquee tool and the single column marquee tool. So that's just selecting a single row, a horizontal row of pixels, or a single column, a vertical row of pixels. Those I don't really use that often unless I'm making like a gridded out image. Then I will use those, but not really the most useful thing right now. We usually use the rectangle marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool with fill layers, right? So if I made a circle right there, I could go layer, new fill layer, solid color, okay, and I could have a red circle in the middle of my image. So it's a masking tool. We see over here in our layers, we have the adjustment on the left and the mask on the right. Every layer that we open always has a mask. And if we're using a selection tool, we are going to be selecting part of the mask and blocking out part of the mask. So in this little thumbnail preview, it's showing us everything that's black is not being affected. Everything that is white is part of the selection. So that's why that turns red. The other thing I want to show you is if I make a circle like that, I could then hold down Option, and we see that my cursor turns from, just the bullseye to having a minus sign next to it. Now I could remove part of it, so now I have like a little moon shape there. Even more of a moon shape. So that's by hitting Option, you're subtracting part of the selection. You're subtracting part of the selection. If I hold down Shift, I can add more, right? So I can make a selection of a bunch of circles. They don't have to be touching, or they could touch like that. And then if I did a fill layer there, I could go Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color. Okay, let's do yellow, or this weird green color. Okay, so that's how you could do multiple circles. Inversely, you could also do, let's do rectangle marquee tool. Let's make a big rectangle, and then say that we want to take a circle out of the middle of that. So I'm going to hit Control, select the elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to hold down Option on my keyboard to subtract. So Option to subtract from a selection, Shift to add to a selection. So now what I have selected is everything except for this middle circle and everything outside of the original rectangle. If I go Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color, okay, go red, okay. So that's how we can make really quick masks with the rectangle and the elliptical marquee tool. I think that's really useful to know. All right. The lasso tool, same thing. It makes selections, but it's freehand, right? Pretty easy. We can click into the polyogonal. I can never say that very good. Polyogonal, and we can add to the selection. We're not going to go too much more in depth with these tools because, like I said, we're going to cover all of them pretty soon here. So the polyogonal always makes straight line selections. Anytime you want to deselect something, so say I selected something and I don't like the selection, I can go select, deselect, or I could go Command D on the keyboard and that deselects. Command D deselects. And then the last tool in this is the magnetic lasso tool. The magnetic lasso tool kind of is a Photoshop tool that follows lines of similar contrast. So it's a way to trace around an image that has similar contrast areas, and it'll drop points of selection for you. We'll get more into that next week. Okay, I'll be back in the next part to just really cover the last bits of tools that we're going to be using. I'll see you then. Oops.